You know, as I was preparing for this service, which is a bit of a tradition for me at least, following water communion to do a service honoring those who have committed to leadership roles in the church. But it was a little bit hard this year to focus on our church and our leadership right now with everything else going on. There are so many things that are just a mess. The Delta variant that has made us change all of our plans, Afghan refugees, the growing sense of isolation coupled with the feeling of tension within our communities, as some folks seem to be less concerned with the safety of all than their own particular needs and wants. These are all things that I could certainly preach to today. But then my spiritual director asked me, I meet with a spiritual director at least once a month. It's not quite like therapy, but they definitely go hand in hand. And she asked me, who are the ancestors that I am looking to for inspiration lately? Who is speaking to me? And she was talking about not necessarily literal biological ancestors, but my spiritual ancestors, the people I use as guides, those who I draw from for power. And we talked about that for a little bit. And I realized that some of the words I wanted to share with you today about leadership came from those ancestors. And then I had a flashback to the very first Unitarian Universalist workshop I attended, like a weekend workshop that I attended. 13 years ago. And it was called Harvest the Power. It was a Lee leadership faith development course during the workshop. And it started out with some icebreakers. And one of the icebreakers was to share a leadership icon, someone you looked up to as a leader. This person is a leader and I'd like to be a leader like them, and a little bit about why. I'd love to know who your leadership icons are in the chat, or maybe after service. I'll let you know mine was Kermit the Frog. So you can judge my effectiveness by that metric if you want, but I don't know that I'll ever measure up to Kermit. Although Muppets and Unitarian Universalists, I think, I have a lot in common. So I think Kermit and I would have a good conversation. But the point of where I'm trying to get to here is that these models, these spiritual ancestors, these icons that we look to of living and leading are a way to orient ourselves toward what is possible. They're an example that can guide us, that can inspire us, that says something about who we want to be in the world. And connection to how we want to be in the world, connection to an orientation, a guide, a direction, is part of what can ground us amidst the uncertainty and tension and sorrow that we see in the world right now. And it connects us to our faith, which we love as well. And it reminds us that although perfection is not possible, excellence is. Now, one of the ancestors that I have been engaging with a lot lately is actually not an ancestor, it's a living person. And his name is Carey Nieuwhof, and he is a megachurch evangelical pastor. Now, you will not hear me quoting megachurch evangelical pastors all that often in a flattering light in this pulpit, but I think it's important to give them their due when it's warranted. And he writes a lot about leadership and the purpose of the church and the future of the church. And here is something he said that really stuck out to me, that I've been sitting with. Most people, including you, I suspect, are exhausted by the division, tribalization, and anger that characterizes culture today. That's fair. It's pretty clear that the culture is tired of itself too, but it doesn't quite know how to escape. That's the perfect opportunity for the church to simply be the church. An exhausted culture needs an alternative to itself, not an echo of itself. Authentic, grace-filled, hope-bearing, truthful people are what our friends and neighbors need. A generation tired of hate, yet caught in its grip, will only be released from it if there is a clear alternative. I would not be here today in this pulpit, physically for the second time in a year and a half, serving this ministry with all of you, if I did not believe that Unitarian Universalism offers that clear alternative. Not just to hate and division in the world, but to the hopelessness that is all too easy to pick up and carry, that pervades our culture and takes root in the hurting, in the apathetic, in the unmoored, in the skeptical, in the vulnerable. And which of you listening today, and which of you here today with me, can't recall a moment where you have not been every single one of those things? Now, Carrie and I might have a different idea about what it means to be the church, and we might have different theology and different ideas about what that clear alternative is. But the unending crisis mind that we're living in is overwhelming, and that solution will not come from any one of us. There may not be a solution to be found. I hate it when that happens, but it does. But I would not have thrown my life and excellence and orientation towards the good in with all of you and in with this faith if I didn't think it mattered one way or another how we moved through the world. What we do here matters less to me than how what we do here shapes and changes and informs everything that we do out there. How we talk about the afterlife with our deeply Christian uncle, how we navigate a conversation about Black Lives Matter with our red hat wearing neighbors, how we stand up for children at the local school board meeting, how we raise our children, how we manage employees, how we serve our customers, what kind of friend we are, what kind of spouse we are, and what kind of human being we are. That is what matters in terms of being the church. Which brings me to another spiritual ancestor of mine, Angus MacLean, who's a very important religious educator in the 20th century in the Unitarian Universalist tradition. And my primary archetype is teacher. I am a teacher type person. You probably have noticed this. And so I draw a lot from philosophies of education, not just in terms of what I might teach in a class, but what I do with my ministry. And Angus MacLean wrote this wonderful thing called The Method is the Message. It was an essay, and then he gave it as a talk, or maybe he gave it a talk and then as an essay. But The Method is the Message is the title of this. And what he means is that what we do is at least as important as what we say we are learning. That our greatest learning comes not from the content or the explicit curriculum of a message, right? The explicit curriculum of this sermon is the words that I'm speaking and the readings that I'm giving you. But there's other curriculum at play. The implicit curriculum is the curriculum that is taught without speaking, without words. For example, we have tried to lift up many different types of leadership in this service. You'll be hearing from several church leaders later. When we create a worship service, we try to bring in multiple voices and multiple perspectives. We try to bring the creative process into the worship service every time. And you may not realize it, but what we're teaching with that is that creativity and collaboration are part of what make life beautiful. I may not say that every Sunday, but every worship that I build is intended to teach that message whether you realize it or not. The method is the message. And here's what Angus MacLean says. To teach the great learnings of humanity, that love is the greatest thing in the world, that justice for all in the long run serves all best, that whenever goodwill arises to dominate our councils, we are drawn together, and we are separated by suspicion and fear and greed and domination. I shall leave this idea in its boldest form. Such values as we are concerned with cannot be communicated except as they are set in operation. The things we believe don't matter until we put them into action. Given life in the human relations in which teachers and taught are involved, they don't matter until they have an existence within human relations. Love exists only when someone is loved. Later in this service, you'll hear from 3 of Northwood's fantastic lay leaders, Beth Marshall, Brenda Cooper, and David Shantz. And you'll hear a lot about their background as leaders in their reflections, but you will also hear a theme. In becoming leaders, however that happened, each has found a personal transformation as well as transformation within this community and a deeper sense of belonging. Because each of these 3 lay leaders not only has experienced personal change and growth and transformation, but they have been instrumental in the growth and change and transformation that Northwoods has experienced as a group. Because that is the beauty of what we call here shared ministry, that it's shared between myself and all of you and the leaders that step forward and are called forward to serve. Each person who comes into this congregation and puts their heart and soul into it changes it in a significant way. And we would not be the same without it. I hope you hear their stories and you're inspired to join them in this grand experiment of church, what theologian James Luther Adams called a place where we practice being human. And if you're inspired to take a more active role in this community, even if, and especially if, you aren't sure what that looks like, I invite you to join me for a 2-hour workshop later this fall on lay leadership as spiritual practice, to learn more about yourself and about what leadership can look like here at Northwoods. There'll be more information on that in the Beacon Bits to sign up to and learn more and see if you might be interested in having that experience. The title of this service is The Congregation is the Curriculum, and that's the third line. It's sort of a 3-part mantra that I was taught very early in my experience as a lay leader, which is Unitarian Universalism is all we teach, faith development is all we do, and the congregation is the curriculum. The method is the message. What we do here informs what we do out there, and that is the magic of this community.